The football presenter Gary Lineker will step back from presenting Match of the Day this weekend after the BBC decided his tweet, which criticised the government's migrant policies, breached their guidelines on impartiality. The programme will be presenter-less tomorrow. Oh, goodness, it goes from bad to worse. A BBC spokesman has said some of our pundits have said that they don't wish to appear on the programme whilst we seek to resolve the situation with Gary. We understand their position, and we've decided that the programme will focus on match action without studio presentation or punditry. Well, the BBC are in a mess, and who better to analyse the fallout than Fleet Street legend, pioneering newspaper editor Eve Pollard. Hi, Eve.
Hi.
Great to have you back. I think you're back from Florida, so it's good to see you
Very
back
lucky
in
to go
Blighty.
there.
What a right royal mess. And in terms of Gary, it's all me, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, all I can say is welcome to the most toxic election you've ever heard of. I'm told, having just come back from being away for a couple of weeks, the world is on manoeuvres. Well, not the world, the Labour Party is on manoeuvres. There's drinks, there's lunch, there's dinner, there's plotting, there's everything. Virtually, apparently, anybody who's ever been a Labour MP is now in it, right up to their necks. There's polling, there's plotting, there's all of that, which I don't blame them for, because they've been out of office for a long time. You get together with your friends. It's like seeing old pals. It's like the old days, and they're desperate about winning this time. Now, maybe the Tories are too. I haven't heard about what they're doing. I suppose they're trying to run the country. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I haven't heard anything about, the Green Party, small group, and the Lib Dems. But it is fascinating. We are now still possibly 18 months, maybe more, away from an election, and it's really started in earnest.
Well, indeed. And I wonder whether Gary Lineker's position on the migrant legislation being drawn up by the government plays into the government's hands, because we're all talking about this one policy, which really could move the dial next year for Rishi Sunak.
Well, I think a successful immigration policy will move the dial. Now, whether this is possible, whether this is feasible, I think that Gary was going too far. Of course I would think that, to compare it to the Nazis. You cannot compare anything we're doing in this country to the Nazis, who killed Jews, communists, gays, all sorts of people in the most murderous, most horrible way. So, of course he went too far. And it's interesting to see the people who are supporting him.
It's the media elite, isn't it?
The media elite. But also, the whole thing about the social media is, it's dangerous, it's dirty. You can say anything you like. In the old days, of course I would refer to this, newspapers had to be checked by a lawyer. Otherwise you got sued. You can say anything on social media. And of course, as you know, really clever people have undone themselves and left it. But of course, you can say what you like. Gary Lineker is a brilliant sports commentator, we have to admit that. And he's just gone too far. He went too far. He gave the BBC no option when he said he was sure he would still be in place on Saturday. And when he said he was chatting to the Director General often. You've got to be careful. The BBC, we're all paying for it. You, me, everybody who watches television is paying for it.
Yes, and tomorrow night, no presenter at all. What a farce.
Well,
wouldn't it be ironic if the ratings were even higher than usual?
Well, it would be. But, of course, sport is so important. Having edited 2 Sunday newspapers, sport is essential. If you don't have the sport report for their team, you don't sell. And when you consider the viewing figures, so, for example, the BBC 10 o'clock news, these are the latest figures I could find publicly, gets watched by 4.2 million at its best. Match of the Day gets at least 7 million. So it's talking to young kids. I'm part of a football family. I'm afraid they're all Arsenal fans, which has probably made half the audience hate me already. Wife, mother, grandmother of kids who are fascinated by the game. And he is in a very prominent position. But it's sad, it's tragic if he loses this, but it's also dangerous to say the things he said.
And how can this organisation allow one man to cause such trouble for them?
Well, I think the BBC have a lot of problems. You had newscasters and news people who left because they couldn't comment on news.
Emily Maitlis,
John Sopel.
Andrew Marr.
Absolutely, brilliant people. But the BBC's got to stick to it, and they've got to hold on to it. And throwing up the chairman, who really does not get involved in day-to-day programmes, is a sort of red herring, I think, really.
Yeah.
And he was a Tory donor. Well, you can have been all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Many people have changed parties. I mean, you know, I don't know who's sports. But it's just a red herring thrown in, and they'll try and make him somebody to go for. And he's still under some sort of situation where they're going to decide. But he was a friend of Boris's.
No, that's right. His position is being reviewed, and I'm not sure he's got much of a case to answer. As you say, whoever is chairman of the BBC, it's historically often been quite politicised.
It's always a political appointment.
Yeah.
I mean, it always has been.
Yeah.
So it's fair enough that the Tories have somebody that they know, and Rishi Sunak apparently knows him very well.
Yeah.
So I think it's sad if they go punditless tomorrow, because I was hoping we'd have perhaps 3 more pundits. I mean, there are other footballers who could do this.
Yeah.
And maybe, possibly, a woman.
Well, wouldn't that be
well, there's Gabby Logan, there's Alex Scott. They do a brilliant job.
Yeah, for sure. And what about the BBC itself? Do you think they're suffering major reputational damage in the context of this story? Because many of my viewers and listeners have been irritated by the BBC in terms of their one-note coverage during the pandemic, and, of course, their coverage of Brexit, which many consider to have been against Brexit.
Well, I think there is a different view. I mean, you look at Gary Lineker's house. It's lovely. It's in a very nice area. It's got lots of space. I think there are a lot of people who feel we're squashed as an island. We can only take so many people. May I say we must always take people who are running away from persecution. We must always keep this great British tradition we have of saving people who are possibly going to be killed where they live. But this is not like that. We know that many, I mean, they all seem to be men in the main coming across on these boats. Many of them are from countries which are having no war, no problem, just a sort of rather dull economy, maybe.
In the summer, a third of those crossing were Albanians.
Yeah. So that can't be right. But I also think that as a country, we're turning our back on something very simple. You may ask, why do the French not have this problem? The French have ID cards. And I'm afraid in the world that we live in now, we should have an ID card, which tells people who's here properly and who's here illegally. And that would probably sort the whole problem out.
Of course, they've got their migrant camps in Calais, haven't they? And they've got the jungle.
But the migrant camps are only in Calais because those people don't want to stay in France. They want to come here. They would, if a lot of people come to France from countries that the French used to run, like Algeria, Morocco, they get the ID card, which is called, I've forgotten now, but it's an accreditation card that says you're in the country, you're legal, you can get money from the taxes, you know, if you need it, go to the doctors, you can use all the services of that country, and most of all, you can work. And with that carte de séjour, that's what it's called, a carte de séjour. You've
had some of the biggest jobs in the media. Let's imagine for one moment that you're the Director General of the BBC. We can only dream. Gary Lineker, do you back him or sack him?
I think unless Gary Lineker says he will stop, and I mean stop, using social media to push his case. And I'm not saying his case is wrong. I'm only worried about this situation because I think it's going to take months and we need to sort this out quite fast. And actually, Tony Blair and William Hague did produce this idea. I mean, we all walk around with credit cards. We all walk around with something that distinguishes us. I was always against the idea of identity cards, but I think that would help. I mean, I think that would sort out who should be here and who shouldn't.
Well, look, so you always should be here because we love having you on the programme. Eve Pollard, welcome back from the United States and look forward to having you on the panel very soon.
Thank you.
Former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Fleet Street legend, the one and only Eve Pollard. Well, we've asked you on Twitter, are Gary Lineker's BBC colleagues wrong or right to stand in solidarity with them? Well, 57% say they're wrong, 43% give them their backing.